Some cities seem like they will last forever. Cities built on hills, surrounded by walls so tall and so thick that no army could ever break through them by force. Cities that endure not just because of their stone, but because of the pride of the people who live inside them. Troy was one of those cities. And yet, it fell. Not under the weight of spears, not because of the number of its enemies. It fell because its own people opened the gates and let in the very thing that would destroy them. But to understand how that happened, we need to go back a little. It all started with a decision that changed the fate of two worlds. Paris, a prince of Troy, took Helen away with him, the wife of King Menelaus of Sparta. Some said Helen left of her own free will. Others said Paris won her over with words and promises. Still others said the whole thing was the work of Aphrodite, goddess of love, repaying a debt she owed the Trojan prince. Whatever the truth, when Helen arrived in Troy, Menelaus could not forgive it. He went to his brother Agamemnon, king of kings, the most powerful of all the Greeks, and together they called on the kings and warriors of Greece. The insult was too great to ignore. They had to go and take Helen back. Troy had to answer for what it had done. And so began one of the longest and most devastating wars that Greek mythology remembers. The Greeks crossed the Aegean Sea with hundreds of ships and thousands of men. Among them were the greatest warriors of their time, Achilles, fast and relentless, whose fury was as feared as his spear; Odysseus, king of Ithaca, famous not for his strength, but for his mind; Agamemnon, who commanded the army with authority and with pride. On the other side, Troy had its own heroes. The most respected of all was Hector, son of King Priam, prince and warrior, the pillar on which the Trojan resistance rested. Hector had not sought this war, but he faced it with everything he had. The gods took sides as well. Olympus was divided. Athena and Hera wanted to see Troy fall. Apollo and Aphrodite defended it. This divine involvement added yet another layer of uncertainty to a war that was already impossible to control. Men fought, but the gods were also moving their pieces. The years went by. 1, 2, 5, 9 years. The Greek camp was set up along the shore, directly across from the walls of Troy. There were battles almost every day. There were moments when the Greeks pushed forward. There were moments when the Trojans fought back with real force. Great warriors fell on both sides. Achilles killed Hector in a duel that left a mark on the heart of the war. Later, Achilles himself met his end, struck by an arrow from Paris, guided, according to legend, by Apollo himself. The war consumed lives and hope with equal ease. But Troy was still standing. Its walls would not give. The Greeks could win battles in open ground, but the city itself remained untouched. There was no way in, no way to break through those defenses by force. And at that point, after nearly 10 years of war, the exhaustion was real on both sides. The Greeks longed to go home. The Trojans missed the peace that had existed before any of this began. That was when Odysseus proposed something nobody expected. Odysseus was known among the Greeks for one thing above all else: his cleverness. He was not the strongest or the fastest, but he was the sharpest. When force failed, his mind found another way. And standing there in front of walls they could not break, Odysseus came up with an idea that had nothing to do with strength. It had everything to do with deception. Build a horse, an enormous wooden horse, large enough to conceal a group of armed soldiers inside. Leave it in front of the walls of Troy as if it were an offering to the gods. Then all the other Greek soldiers would board their ships and sail away from the coast. The Trojans would see the ships leave, would see the camp abandoned, would see the horse standing there alone on the shore, and they would believe the war was over. The idea was so unexpected that for a moment nobody knew what to say. But Odysseus was right. If force had not worked, perhaps deception would. The horse was built. It was a massive structure, with enough room inside to hide several of the best Greek warriors. They built it with care, made it imposing, almost sacred in appearance. Then the chosen soldiers climbed inside and settled in silence. The rest of the Greek army broke down the camp, boarded the ships, and sailed out to sea, beyond the horizon. Not too far, just far enough to look from Troy, like they were gone for good. The next morning, the Trojans looked out from their walls and saw something they had not expected. The Greek camp was gone. The ships were not there. The shore was empty, almost empty, because out there, in the middle of that sudden silence, stood something enormous and strange. A wooden horse, so large it seemed impossible that anyone could have built it in a single night. What the Trojans felt in that moment was a mixture of things that are hard to put into words. Relief, maybe. The feeling that what had lasted nearly 10 years had finally come to an end. Curiosity about this mysterious object the Greeks had left behind. And for some, suspicion. Laocoon, a Trojan priest, was among the first to speak up. He said clearly that the gift should not be trusted, that the Greeks never did anything without a reason, that an offering this large, left without explanation, was exactly the kind of thing that should raise alarm. Cassandra, the Trojan princess who had the gift of seeing the future but the curse of never being believed, also warned of the danger. She said that if the horse entered the city, Troy would fall. Nobody listened. Almost nobody listened to Laocoon either. The desire to believe the war was over was too strong. The relief of seeing the empty camp was too real. And to many, the horse looked like a divine sign, an offering left by the Greeks to honor the gods, something that, if destroyed, might bring misfortune down on the city. The Trojans decided to bring the horse inside Troy. They had to widen the gates of the wall to fit it through. They rolled it on logs, pulling with ropes, while the people around them celebrated and sang. The whole city came out to watch. It was a day of joy. It was the end of the war. That night, Troy celebrated. They celebrated with wine and music, with the relief of people who believe they have survived something enormous. And at some point during that night, when the city was asleep and the torches were starting to go out, the soldiers hidden inside the horse opened the hatch from within and climbed down in silence onto the streets of Troy. Then they went and opened the city gates. The Greek ships, which had been waiting in the darkness at a safe distance, came back. The army entered. The fall of Troy did not come the way it had tried to come for 10 years, with spears and shields against the walls. It came at night, from inside, in silence. What remained afterward was the end of something that had seemed unbreakable. Troy, the proud city, the city that had held out through years of war without surrendering, fell to something it had chosen to welcome in. That paradox is what makes this myth so powerful thousands of years later. It is not just the story of a war. It is the story of trust, of hope placed in the wrong thing, of warnings ignored because people want too badly to believe something is true. There were voices that said the horse was a trap. There were signs. There were words spoken with urgency and clarity. But the desire for the war to be over was stronger than caution. And in the world of Greek mythology, that always comes at a price. The wooden horse remained in memory not as a symbol of victory, but as something more complicated. An image of a door opened from the inside, a deception accepted with joy, and a city that fell at the very moment it believed it was finally safe.